Welcome everyone to this explainer. We're jumping right into something I find absolutely fascinating today. We're going to be exploring the true anatomy of liberation, diving deep into spiritual geography and doing a psychological breakdown of human nature based on the Demetrian media maxim. We often think of liberation as just a simple physical event, right? A moment when chains literally break and doors fly open. But as we're about to see, physical freedom, that's really just the very beginning of a much deeper, way more complex journey of decolonizing the human heart. So let's get into it.
You can take the man out of Egypt, but only the blood of the lamb can take Egypt out of the man. Think about that for a second. This is the core thesis of our source material today, and it perfectly sets the stage for everything we're going to talk about. It highlights the ultimate paradox of liberation. Physically walking out of a place of bondage is honestly often the easiest step in redemption. It's one thing to change your physical location, but it is a monumental task to change the internal landscape of your desires.
To really understand how this works, we need to look at the actual structure of the prophetic record. There's this incredible numerical balance hidden right there in the text.
Specifically, the number 13. In the geometry of Egyptian bondage laid out in the text, 13 isn't just some random figure. It literally stands exactly at the threshold of transition. It's the structural pivot point that binds a divine, spiritual call on one side to an active, physical confrontation on the other. It's the exact midpoint between the idea of freedom and the gritty reality of actually fighting for it.
You can see this stark visual duality when you look at the text side by side. On one side, you have Exodus 3:10. This is the initial commissioning, that famous moment at the burning bush. It's the divine calling to draw the people out. It's beautiful, it's symmetrical, but mirror that exactly in Exodus 10:3, and we hit direct confrontation with Pharaoh's pride. This is the mandate to break a stubborn will. We move from being called by God to the intense, visceral reality of having to shatter stubborn human pride to achieve real freedom. The threshold requires execution.
And that mandate to break stubbornness, well, it becomes a deeply personal, life or death choice when we look at the actual law of redemption.
The text introduces us to the analogy of the donkey. Now, in the natural order, the donkey is an unclean animal. It's strong-willed, it's incredibly stubborn, and it's intrinsically bound to earthly labor. But spiritually speaking, this isn't just an agricultural lesson. The donkey is a direct, uncompromising mirror for human nature when it's left entirely to its own pride. It represents our own unyielding condition, that internal posture of resistance that we, as humans, just love to cling to.
So the law of redemption gives us two stark, binary outcomes here. First, redemption via the lamb. The unclean donkey, which, again, is us, is exchanged for the clean, sacrificial lamb. This maps perfectly to the ultimate Redeemer stepping into our place. But if you refuse that, you get step 2, the broken neck. The law states that if the stubborn donkey isn't redeemed, its neck must be broken. It's a severe, visceral consequence. Refusing the substitution literally severs the connection between the head and the body, meaning you are entirely cut off from your ancestral lineage and the body of promise. You are either redeemed or you are severed. There's no middle ground.
This brings us to a massive misconception that we really need to shatter today: the illusion of geographic safety. I want you to really absorb this. Geography saved absolutely no one. A critical insight from this whole narrative is that the plague of the firstborn wasn't just a physical judgment on the nation of Egypt. It was a highly targeted spiritual judgment on all unblooded houses. Living in the right zip code or standing in the supposedly safe region of Goshen gave you zero automatic immunity. When you break down this divine decree, it's basically a matrix of judgment. You've got folks marked by the blood, their status is covered, they carry that true Israelite spirit, and their outcome is life and exodus. But then, look at the uncovered household. And get this, that didn't just mean physical Egyptians. That applied to the carnal Israelite, someone physically residing in Israelite tents, spiritually trapped in Goshen, thinking their heritage alone was going to save them. Nope. Their outcome was the exact same death and judgment as the oppressors. Heritage meant absolutely nothing without the blood.
Which leads to this ultimate takeaway. The threshold required explicit action. You couldn't just have the right ancestry or be sitting in the right spot on the map. Goshen was a total illusion of safety. True protection required the physical, intentional application of the blood to the doorposts. An Israelite who ignored that explicit action suffered the exact same devastating loss as an Egyptian household.
Okay, so what happens after the physical chains actually fall off? Let's talk about the condition of the human heart and this terrifying appetite for bondage.
Listen to this tragic cry that echoes from the wilderness. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. I mean, wow. Think about the psychology behind that statement. Why on earth would someone long to return to their own slavery? It reveals this deeply rooted generational trauma where the mind remains totally colonized even after the physical chains are broken. They are physically free, yet their hearts are crying out for the whips of their oppressors. It's a deeply uncomfortable truth about internalized oppression.
Let's unpack this a bit more. First, the comfort of slavery. The text says they crave the leeks, onions, and garlic of Egypt. These represent familiar comforts within bondage. Think about our own lives. How often do we return to toxic but familiar habits just because they feel safe? Second, the demand of the wilderness. Surviving out there required living entirely on faith and manna. Third, it demanded a total surrender of self, completely letting go of an internalized reliance on the oppressor's system. And finally, the tragic end. Those who continuously yearned for the familiar toxicity of Egypt, they died in the wilderness. They literally never saw the promise fulfilled.
When you contrast these timelines, you see the overarching paradox of the whole story. Physical departure, God drew the people out of Egypt in a single night. Boom, done. But internal freedom, purging the appetite of Egypt from their desires, took an entire generation. External change can happen in an instant, for sure, but true internal freedom, unlearning generations of bondage, decolonizing the mind, and completely rewiring your heart, that is a grueling, lifelong process. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question to ponder today. Are your feet walking toward the promised land while your heart remains in Goshen? Are you just going through the motions of liberation, taking the right physical steps forward while secretly craving the toxic, familiar comforts of your past bondage? Remember, geography saves no one. Physical freedom is just the invitation. It is the internal transformation that actually secures the promise. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope this deep dive leaves you with plenty to chew on today.